Im Anbetracht der Tatsache, dass die Rewards für Helium Mining in den letzten paar Wochen langsam aber stetig zurückgegangen sind, fragen sich viele von euch, ob es sich überhaupt noch lohnt, in das Thema Helium Mining einzusteigen, wenn ihr nicht bereits eingestiegen seid, beziehungsweise viele von euch bekommen Hotspots und fragen sich, soll ich sie aufstellen, soll ich sie verkaufen etc. Und da sind so viele Variablen in dieser Entscheidungsfindung involviert, dass die Antwort darauf nicht einfach ist. Aber heute möchte ich euch ein Tool zeigen, das euch dabei helfen kann, und es ist, soweit ich das beurteilen kann, die beste Software, wenn es darum geht, Hotspot-Sende-Empfangsleistung zu simulieren. Ihr könnt es auch umsonst machen. Ihr bekommt 10 Simulationen umsonst, wenn ihr den Link in der Beschreibung benutzt, und 20% Rabatt, wenn ihr den Discount-Code Kryptomarco benutzt. Wenn ihr zum Beispiel sagt, ihr wollt mehr Simulationen kaufen oder hochwertigere Software, längere Geschichten und so etwas erwerben bei Hotspot Rf. Und ich habe heute jemanden von Hotspot Rf ins Boot geholt, das uns zeigen kann, wie Hotspot Rf funktioniert, was die neuen Funktionen sind, und bin sehr dankbar, dass er hier ist. Natürlich, der gute Aiden ist aus Hotspot Rf, aus einer Company, die eben in den Vereinigten Staaten sitzt. Darum ist das Ganze jetzt ausnahmsweise in Englisch. Ich hoffe, ihr verzeiht mir das. But yeah, Aiden, thank you so much for being here and showing our German audience what Hotspot Rf is and how it works, what the new features are, and yeah, tell us a little bit something about that.
Hey, what's going on, guys? Thank you for the introduction, Marco. I unfortunately don't speak a lot of German, so
that's right.
I'm assuming it's good praise. Thank you for having me on the channel. I'm looking forward to showing you guys our tool today. So without further ado, I am going to go ahead and share my screen here. Is that working for you, Marco?
Yes, I can see it.
Awesome. So I think it's important to kind of start off with how we kind of got into this business and how we started off basically creating this tool. So I got into helium mining about 2019. I ordered my first couple miners like mid to early 2019. It was like those original helium hotspots. I believe they only made like 30,000 of them. And I ended up waiting 6 months, of course, to get my miner. Got it set up. Obviously that they were doing really well. I had one set up at like a 21st floor apartment down in San Diego, where I'm located. So they're going really well. And I said, this is really cool. It's kind of got a real life actual use case, unlike a lot of these other blockchain type projects. So I bought a couple more, and it kind of just all escalated from there. I kept selling tokens, unfortunately at $1, probably should have kept those, but I kept selling a bunch of tokens that I was mining. I mean, at one point I had a miner that was making like 100 a day. It was absolutely insane at the beginning. But anyway, sold a bunch of tokens, kept buying more and more miners. And I basically turned this into a business. I launched Meshly.io. That was basically one of the first like helium deployment businesses that bought, tens or hundreds of hotspots and mailed them out to people and gave them basically a percentage of their rewards. And in that process, me and my team were having a really hard time trying to figure out what locations earn the best. Is this location going to work well? Is this location going to earn poorly? And it really ends up being a really bad waste of your time if you go and set it up at your friend's house, or you mail someone a hotspot and they set it up and it ends up performing really poorly. So we tried to figure out, we were using Google Earth and looking at the terrain and like saying, okay, does this guy kind of have line of sight to these other hotspots, and pulling up the Helium Explorer, and really kind of just using a bunch of different tools and like RF simulation software and all of this. And I knew that there had to be a better way. So basically that's how Hotspot-RF was born. Originally, it was just going to be a very simple tool that we used internally. And I thought, this is really cool. A bunch of other people are launching these little projects in the community. I kind of want to get back and, release this to other people. I think there's obviously a big need for it. A lot of people are having this issue just like I am. So that's how Hotspot-RF was born. I partnered up with one of my friends who's a developer, and he basically built out the portal and built out everything that you see today. That was about a year ago that we actually launched the software. I think it was March last year. So it's been almost a year since our inception and our kind of initial launch. We're now a team of 4, actually about to bring on a 5th and second developer to our team in the next couple of days here. And yeah, we've come a long way. And we're excited to kind of present to you guys and show you what Hotspot-RF is and what it does if you haven't heard of us yet. Any questions so far, Marco?
No, I'm curious. Just question is, how do you feel about selling tokens at $1? But I think that everybody of us can like empathize with that feeling looking back. I mean, you did what you with the information that you had back then, and nobody can look into the future and see how the price goes. But
Yeah, absolutely.
great thing that you were involved since such an early time.
Yeah, so I ended up actually, I mean, I pretty much reinvested every penny of that money back into more miners. So in the grand scheme of things, it probably worked out okay. You know,
Yes.
probably would have been better to keep a lot of those tokens, but it is what it is. You live and you learn. And it's helium's treated me okay, so I can't complain too much. But anyway, kind of jumping into Hotspot-RF. So what Hotspot-RF does is it basically brings a lot of different data all into one portal. So basically we start by you plugging in your address. Once you plug in your address, you can set the different settings like antenna height, antenna gain, depending on what kind of antenna you're using, frequency, all of that kind of information. And then you basically click simulate, and it's going to basically simulate the coverage, and it's going to look at, okay, how many hotspots are in my area? Which ones should I be able to reach? How many, average witnesses do they have, et cetera? And then we give you basically an estimate of how much you should earn at that given location. So that's really it in kind of, a 2-sentence nutshell. We do a little bit more than that, but we'll kind of jump into that into the portal. It is a paid program. We do offer 10 free simulation credits for anyone that is interested in kind of testing it out. What you can do with those 10 credits is basically simulate and see your RF coverage, but you will not be able to get that estimated reward. Everything we do is extremely CPU intensive. Unfortunately, our AWS bill is extremely high, so we do need to charge for this. We can't just offer this to the community. But without further ado, I think it'll be good to kind of, as far as our pricing plans go, it starts as cheap as $10 a month. You're welcome to sign up and cancel at any time. If you just wanted 1 month, that's absolutely fine as well. And then the plans kind of go up from there, depending on how many different locations you want to simulate. So without further ado, I kind of like to show people a couple different locations that I have set up. So these are part of my fleet. These are some of my first couple hotspots that I set up. So this one is actually up on a hill overlooking kind of a suburban area. I can't really see it super well maybe on the video, but basically all of this treed area, these are all suburbs. It's kind of a flat area, and this guy is up on a hill. So I actually installed this hotspot right here on this fence post. Unfortunately, I didn't take a picture after I installed it. I took it right before. But I did install this hotspot right on this fence post. It's a rack hotspot with a standard 2.3 dBi antenna. And this is actually one of my better earners. So I always like to show it off a little bit. So I've already pulled it up in the portal. But at any time, if you want to go and check like how your hotspot fares, you can basically type in the name of a hotspot here, select that, and it will take you straight there in the portal. So anyway, it's gone ahead and selected this hotspot. As we can see here, it is up on the hill. There's a couple different options you can do for kind of styling the map. Different, like you can do dark fog, you can see the terrain if you want to see basically how the terrain looks. You can also enable stuff like, where is it? Contour lines.
At the bottom.
You can also enable contour lines. So you can kind of see the elevation. You can enable satellite view. There's basically a lot of different stuff that you can enable. It's like satellite, if you wanted to kind of see what it's going to look like from a satellite type view. So as we can see here, this guy is up on a hill. And we turned on the elevation. So if you right click, you're able to kind of see, all right, this guy is up on a hill. As we see here, there's that fence post over here, and it overlooks this suburban area over here. So we're gonna zoom out. I did want to explain a little bit more, and I think it's a little bit easier to see if we go back to like a dark mode or light mode. So we get some questions about this. So a lot of people know that there is a dead zone when your hotspot sends a beacon. So these red hexes here are basically the dead zone. So if there are other hotspots in this area, so let's say like this hotspot here was in one of these dead zones, your hotspots will not be able to basically witness each other and receive rewards from each other. So that's important to know. Most people think it's 300 meters, so we like to draw this 300-meter ring here as well, just to show the difference. The 300 meters is just kind of an approximation. So as you can see here, sometimes, like, let's say a hotspot's right here. If you can see my cursor, it would technically be out of the 300 meters, so most people would think that's okay, but it is actually 8 hex res 11s, which are drawn here.
Okay.
So just kind of a cool visualization tool. I can't talk this morning, sorry guys. To kind of see what's going to work well. And the green hexes really just kind of show where, like, you more or less should be guaranteed to be able to reach those other hotspots, unless, you know, there's a massive brick wall or lead wall or something in between you guys.
Okay.
Other than that, you can obviously see all the different hotspots. These hotspots are colored. So green is obviously going to be the best transmit scale, and red is obviously going to be the worst. So obviously, if you look in like San Francisco area over here, there's a lot of hotspots. Obviously, it's the home of helium kind of tech hub. So there's a lot of hotspots all throughout the Bay Area. Over here in the suburbs, though, there's not too many. And being on kind of this good hill overlooking the area is going to be great. So anyway, let's go ahead and input these settings. Like I said, 2.3 dBi rack antenna. This is about 15 feet on that pole. This is an outdoor placement, right? And then as far as the terrain goes, this is going to be a clear line of sight, what I would call a clear line of sight. As we saw from that original picture, we can see for miles, you know, in every direction from the top of this hill. So we're going to select clear line of sight. And the terrain setting is very important. So now we'll kind of circle back to that. So while we wait for this to load, it does take generally somewhere between like 30 and 120 seconds, depending on how much data it needs to gather. I know that's a little bit of time. So while that takes a minute to load, let's pull up the HotspotRF settings guide. If you're just getting started with the tool, this is a great place to start. If you're not sure what to put for your settings, it kind of just goes through very quickly, you know, what frequency should I use? That's fairly straightforward. It really just depends where you live. What antenna gain should I use? So we tried to list a lot of the most popular brands here, but if yours is not listed here, it should be on your box or on the manufacturer's website. It's usually pretty prominent information, fairly easy to grab. Cable loss, if you're using like an extension cable, there is going to be some signal loss in between your hotspot and the antenna. If it's like a short run, you know, 6 feet or less, you know, even 10 feet or less, it's usually fairly insignificant. But if you start having, you know, a 15, 25, 50-foot cable, you can have a fair amount of loss. So you can include that here. And we do include a link to a calculator where you can even put in your basically type of cable, you know.
Oh yeah, that's the one that I also made a video about how to calculate the cable loss.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
calculator. Yes.
Times Microwave is a great company. They do some good cables. So you can calculate your loss there. The height, obviously, this is one of the most important settings. Height is always going to be obviously a big factor. You know, if it's on your if you live in a house and it's on a first-story window, now it has to go through every single house around you. You're not going to get very far. But if you can get it, you know, up on a roof or overlooking on a hill like the one we're simulating right now, that's obviously going to work a lot better. Or you know, even in a high rise or something like that. And the height is from the ground. We get a lot of questions. It is not from sea level. It's from the ground. Our tool already takes into account all the geography around you. Antenna placement, just indoor, outdoor, that simple. Basically, we add a little bit of loss if it's indoor, just because it's going to have to go through walls and windows and all of that kind of stuff. And then terrain, like I said, this is the most important setting. Make sure to read through this and select the right setting. Obviously, this basically is going to account for having, you know, 200-story skyscraper or 100-story skyscrapers around you, or being in the suburbs, or having, you know, wooded areas around you, all of that kind of stuff. So it's very important to basically select the terrain. I would say this is the most important setting along with height. So make sure to read those and get those right. So anyway, that was a long-winded description of our settings guide. But here we are with a finished simulation. So it took 70 seconds to run this one. This location is obviously performing pretty well. I said it's one of my better ones. I always like to show it off. But as we can see here, it's going to basically simulate the RF coverage. So over here, these are kind of tops of mountains that it's able to hit behind it because it is up on a mountain. But as you can see here, because it's up on this hill overlooking this suburban town called Pleasanton, kind of Dublin area, As you can see here, it gets really good coverage, and the signal strength is pretty strong. So this scale here shows you the signal strength. Red would obviously be the strongest, and negative 120 in purple over here would be the weakest. So as you can see here, the signal strength is actually pretty strong all throughout the suburban area. And it's able to cover quite a distance because it's up on this hill. So as we can see here, there is a Hotspot Rf Score. So this is kind of a metric that we built in. And basically what this means is this hotspot should do basically 132% above average. Last time I checked, the average is about 0.1 HMT per day. So in theory, this hotspot should perform basically 132% better than average. And we give you a weekly HMT estimate of basically 1.7 HMT to 2.5 HMT. So let's go check that compared to our Explorer here. So here we can see the hotspot in the wild. This is its actual performance in the wild. So as you can see here, it's up on this hill and it's able to reach a large number of hotspots in this area over here. This is kind of that Pleasanton area, the Dublin area we talked about. So if we kind of compare that to our coverage map, it was able to reach kind of all of this area, which we saw. And I think on this map, it even showed we were able to reach one other hotspot over here, which it kind of shows here. It's able to get this RF back here and reach a hotspot or two over here as well. So the results do line up really well compared to obviously how hotspots perform in the wild. But I do like to always preface this, this is a simulation. No simulation is ever going to be perfect. There's a lot that goes into this. Even just simulating RF is not an exact science. Radio frequencies are extremely complicated, notoriously complicated. And there's a lot of other factors, your neighbor's hotspot might be right there and you would think you can reach it, but what if it's not online? So your hotspot's not going to be earning, or it's relayed, and it's, there's a lot of different factors that go into this network. So take these simulations with a grain of salt. Nothing's going to be perfect. But I do believe we have kind of the best and most data intensive simulation process on the market.
Yeah, I can definitely agree on that term, that it's data intensive. I mean, I remember for the first time when I started simulating on Hotspot RF, I thought that there was a glitch, a bug or something like that, because it wouldn't react. But then I eventually figured out that it's just a process that takes a lot of time, because I guess there are a lot of data points that need to be calculated for this.
Absolutely.
One thing that I get a lot of questions about, and I talked about this in the past, that I don't know what your take on directional antennas is. As far as I can tell from the community, on paper, some people would do well with a directional antenna, but then end up doing better with an omnidirectional antenna. So I feel like it's hard to gauge whether or not somebody will make more money with a directional or omnidirectional antenna. My background's going crazy. Do you maybe intend to add like the option into Hotspot RF where somebody could choose between simulating a directional antenna as well? Maybe do you even have that now?
Yeah, so we've had a couple of requests for that. It hasn't been really something that's been requested a whole lot, to be honest. I don't think a lot of people decided to go the directional antenna route. Interestingly enough, this location I just simulated would actually probably be a pretty good location for a directional antenna. Just because it is kind of up on a hill and there's a hill behind it. So it doesn't really have much to do behind it. It really just needs to focus on transmitting this way. We don't currently have that like on our roadmap. In a perfect world, if I could snap my fingers, it's a fairly complex integration to add that. And we do have some other priorities first, but it is something we could definitely be, that you could see on our portal in the next year or so, but it's probably not like the highest priority.
Yeah, and I mean, even when you would add that feature, like you have Yagi antennas, you have panel antennas, so it's a big box to open up.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you have all these different antenna patterns. It's a complex problem to solve, but it is something we could add in the future. But I'd say, the vast majority, probably 99% of people are using omnidirectional. So it has not been our focus lately.
All right. Because I saw in the Explorer, it looked... to the untrained eye, it might appear as if you're using a directional antenna because you're witnessing mostly the positions in the north and just one in the south. But usually a directional antenna would not even beacon behind, like to the south. It will only send out the signal into one direction usually. So that's why you would know that it's not a directional antenna. But it just looked like one, and that's why I thought I would ask you that question.
Gotcha, understood.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's just not a lot of hotspots to the south. So that's why I
Okay,
was
yeah.
only able
Makes also
to
sense
reach one or
from the
two.
terrain, yes.
Yep, and then we were looking at, so I took the screenshot yesterday. The rewards yesterday when I took this were 2.44. If we kind of, and Zoom is popping up now. If we kind of take this and look at, or sorry, we need to go to our estimate. We go to this, it estimates 1.7 to 2.55. So that obviously falls in. It looks like today, actually, our rewards have been really good in the past day or two. They're actually slightly
Yeah,
above
God
the
bless.
estimate.
I respect
Yeah,
the
God
hustle.
bless. They're actually slightly above the estimate. I would say our tool is a little bit on the conservative side. You know, I think it's better to underestimate a little bit than overestimate. But obviously, as you can see, it falls pretty close to that estimated range. And we're going to go in. I don't want you guys to have to wait 70 seconds on a live video. So I did simulate this right before we hopped on. But I do want to show you this in the wild first. So this one is at a standard like suburban house. This is a 2-story house. And I'm not sure if you can see the antenna here. Let me blow this up a little bit. But as you can see here, this is actually an 8 dBi antenna. This was installed again just on a normal 2-story suburban house.
8 dBi antenna, and you put a 1.2 into the Explorer?
Into the Explorer, I
Yeah,
believe.
no, I mean in the screenshot it says 1 point something, 1.2 dBi.
Oh boy, yes, I need to update that. I'm sorry, I've been very focused on Hotspot RF, and my helium mining has been
I
on the
mean,
back
it's
burner
still
a little
doing
bit.
well. I mean, I don't know if some of
Oh
your
boy.
users told you that, but I have had users tell me that they put in different numbers or in different cables antennas into their app, and their rewards sometimes go up and down depending on what they put
Interesting.
into the app, which is crazy. Anyway, sorry for interrupting.
Interesting. Yeah, no worries. My helium mining, I've not been the best miner lately. I've been really focused on Hotspot RF,
All right,
but
all right.
I'll make a note to go change that. Good catch. But yeah, so this is an 8 dBi antenna. As you can see, it's a pretty large antenna. We mounted it to an existing, basically TV antenna right here that's diagonal. And obviously the 8 dBi is vertical right here. So if we go and look at the simulation here, it's about 33 feet in the air. 8 dBi antenna, we're going to obviously change those settings to 8 dBi. It's an outdoor placement in the suburbs. So we are going to use suburbs over here. And as we can see here, the coverage for this one, it's not going to go as far. Again, I don't know if we've talked about this too much, but location is king, which is why I think our tool is so important in helping you choose good locations. You know, this is a solid location. It's in a pretty flat suburban area, and I was able to get it high enough that it can still get some decent coverage. But as we saw here, just even with the stock antenna that we were using up on this hill over here, we were able to get, you know, 3 times, 4 times the amount of coverage, even with just a basic antenna. So everyone focuses on upgrading their antennas, but really, honestly, 80% of it is finding a good location. I cannot say that enough.
Amen.
The stock antenna works fantastic in a good location. You don't even need to upgrade it. And it's not going to hurt, but you really don't need to if you have a good enough location. So anyway, as we can see here, we're able to get kind of a couple miles in every direction. This is about 4 or 5 miles, I believe. We're able to hit a fair amount of hotspots in this kind of suburban area. The simulation summary, it says this hotspot's going to perform about 65% above average. So that's not bad. Obviously, it's going to be a decent location. I'd be happy to have a hotspot here all day long. And then it's going to get a weekly H&T estimate of 1.2 to 1.8. So if we look at that compared to the coverage, as you can see here, it's able to cover a good amount of area. There's always going to be a couple outliers, you know, from hotspots that are, you know, way up on a hill over here somewhere that maybe aren't going to be shown on the portal. Again, it's an extremely complex area, RF simulation. And then the earnings for this hotspot over the past 7 days have been 1.57 compared to our estimate. 1.57 more or less kind of falls right in the middle there as well. So as you can see, the tool is fairly accurate, but again, guys, it's just a simulation. Please take it with a grain of salt. Don't come yelling at us if it's, you know, a little bit off or something like that. And please be very careful with what settings you use, because if you use bad settings, you're going to get bad results. It's really that simple. Go ahead, Marco.
When somebody is deploying a new hotspot and he isn't sure, like for example, what kind of antenna works best for him, do you have any tips or what would your approach be to like by trial and error using Hotspot-RF figure out what the best antenna would be? I mean, earlier we said that location is king, and I absolutely agree with you on that. But let's say somebody wants to squeeze out those last 20%.
Yep.
Would you say like, okay, he should do 2 or 3 simulations with just different dBi settings for the antenna, and that's enough? Or do you have to say you have to dig deeper on that?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things you can do. You can try playing with the height, and you could obviously, like, so this simulation was, it was average about 1.5, it looks like there. So if we wanted to do an example, let's say I was able to install a flagpole in my backyard and get this antenna, 30 feet higher. We could do a simulation like that. That would be one way. You could kind of play around with it and see, okay, is it going to perform better, on my first floor, second floor, on the roof? I can tell you the answer is going to be on your roof, but that's one way you can kind of play with and say, okay, well, I currently have it on my second floor. How much would I gain if I go and mount it on my roof and add 10 feet to the height here?
And
So
I
that's
think
one
many
way.
people, if they would run that simulation, they would all of a sudden become a lot braver when it comes to climbing if they would see how much more they would make if they would place it on the roof. I can guarantee
Yeah,
you that. Like height is so incredibly important.
yeah, absolutely. Height is really everything, because that gives you that line of sight over the surrounding area. And the other thing, obviously, you can play with is, okay, I currently have it on my roof or on my second floor window or whatever with a stock antenna. How much would I gain if I were to, get a 6 dBi antenna or an 8 dBi antenna, something like that? So that's another simulation you could run and kind of do the comparison. Hopefully this will load here. We can kind of see the difference that like 15, 20, I think it was about 20 feet of height will add to the simulation. But really, and another thing I always like to talk about kind of on these things is people ask, a lot of kind of the city type areas, urban areas have gone down in rewards a lot. And I'll get back to that. But as we see here, I think the other simulation was about 1.5 weekly estimate was the center.
Yes, yes.
So if we had 20 feet here, bam, suddenly look at this. You're above the tree line, you're above all the houses, and you're able to cover for quite a distance in every direction.
Yes.
So again, the height is really everything. That almost, I think that about doubled your weekly HNT estimate just by getting it up 20 feet. So that's one thing to take into consideration, definitely, when installing hotspots. But a lot of people ask kind of what are going to be the highest performing locations? What is the easiest way to mine HNT without having to, climb on my roof or mount it, get a crazy high gain antenna? Really the best, in my opinion, earning locations are going to be suburban areas like the one we were just looking at, or we can look over here. If you can find, these suburban areas with a good amount of green hotspots, 5+, even, you'd be surprised how much you can actually earn in an area without a lot of hotspots when they're all, green transmit scale. But, obviously stay away from areas like this. The rewards in San Francisco, New York City, San Diego, where I'm at, are terrible right now. But if you can get into like a suburban area, which obviously probably the majority of people live in suburban areas, if you basically can get your hotspot somewhere with elevation over these suburban areas, over these green hotspots with obviously 1.0 transmit scales, and you're able to witness them more than most other people in your area, just because you have that elevation, you have that line of sight over the surrounding area, you're going to earn a lot of HNT. So that's kind of always my advice, and kind of where we're still deploying hotspots with Meshly, kind of where we've been sending them. We have been deploying them basically to more suburban areas and staying out of the big cities. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity out there, and that's intentional by Helium. That's kind of built into the economic model, where they want to encourage coverage where there's not enough coverage yet. They want to encourage coverage in the suburbs and stuff, because the cities are completely saturated at this point.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And something that I often say to people when they send me their hotspot and I take a look at them, and for example, they live in a city. I like to like switch into the Explorer view where you can see how much the explorers around them are earning, and you see
Yep.
that there is a certain amount of height that you need to reach to earn a decent amount in that area. And I tell people, if
Yep.
you can't like look at the hotspots around you, if you can't reach that height, and then ask a friend or a family member who lives in a area that's more interesting. For example, an area with a green transmit scale, where you will have a bigger time than being in a overcrowded city situation where you will set up a hotspot but then get super frustrated because the rewards are low. It is a bigger effort, not just physically of moving, but also like sometimes you need to convince people, sometimes you have to stress to explain to them how to set up everything.
Yep.
But if you like take into consideration by what a factor you increase your rewards, people all of a sudden realize how worth it can be to like maybe tenfold your rewards, for example. So
Yep.
that's also something that I would, where I would say that I totally agree with you. If you don't have the option of, if you have the option of density or suburban area where it's a little far away, maybe you have to place them with somebody you trust, a friend, a colleague, family member, etc. I would usually advise you to do the latter.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's some good advice there. And that's pretty much it for the walkthrough for Hotspot RF. We have a lot of cool stuff coming in the future. Our team's been growing and we've been adding some development talent. We've been working on some cool projects. I don't want to give away too much at the moment, but definitely stay tuned.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess I remember using Hotspot the first time. I don't know if it was October or September, and I feel like the most changes you did were purely for a better overview visually, but the core concept, I mean, it's you type in a few variables and that's it. So not a lot
Yep.
has changed, and I guess that's also due to the fact that it's not rocket science. I mean, in theory, radio waves
Yep.
are rocket science, but like typing
Yep.
in the variables is not rocket science. However, I'm very curious on new features that will come out. And if they do, it would be great if you could showcase them just like you did now, because guys, as you have clearly seen, this is a gentleman that knows his hotspots and is out there risking his life on the roofs and deploying them and living helium 24/7, even wearing a helium shirt, which I don't
Has a
do.
helium shirt on.
Shame on me, shame on me. But you'll be surprised when I reveal my helium tattoo on my forehead soon. Okay, all right. Aiden, thank you so much. Guys, if you enjoyed Hotspot RF, which if you are still watching, I'm sure you did, don't pay the full price, even though this might hurt Aiden, but use the discount code CryptoMarco to get 20% off. The link is in the description, and also everybody who uses the link in the description, actually it's not just exclusive to me, but I guess everybody who onboards on Hotspot RF gets 10 simulations for free. As you can see on the left side of his browser with 2,485 simulations. This gentleman is loaded to buy that many simulations. I mean, of course, it's his company. But yeah, thank you so much for showing us Hotspot RF.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me on the channel, Marco. I look forward to being back.
Yes. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, questions with your Litecoin address under the video, because, you know, with every comment, I am giving away a little bit of Litecoin, enchanted Litecoin. And of course, we have to end the video with, this is not financial advice. Do your own research, like always, okay? All right.